Tonight, the rise of so-called religious nuns.
Those people who answer that question by describing themselves as atheist or agnostic or as simply nothing in particular.
How the church is working to win back the growing number of young people walking away from faith. Plus,
being able to hold your own religious views, that's at the core of what our constitutional protections are really all about.
The Supreme Court prepares to hear a religious freedom case centered on a Colorado web designer. And the power of banks to close your bank account. How some say they're using it against people based on their beliefs. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Americans walking away and losing their religion. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. Church attendance is declining across the United States. The latest figures from the Gallup poll showing for the first time the majority of Americans aren't members of a house of worship. That trend hitting the Episcopal Church especially hard.
Newly released data indicates a massive drop-off in membership. It shows since the start of the pandemic, there are nearly 60,000 fewer baptized members of the Episcopal Church, although people were walking away well before that. In the span of about a decade, the Episcopal Church has lost about 400,000 members.
And it's not just church attendance. The number of people who pray and identify as Christians also on the decline. This trend includes the rise of people with no religious affiliation.
They're known as religious nuns. CBN's Brody Carter examines the trend.
If you want to know how far my love can go, just how deep, just how wide. John Steingard's faith journey reflects America's changing religious landscape. Once part of a Christian band, he's joined a burgeoning group that blurs the traditional lines of religious identification.
I definitely don't think I literally believe in the God that most Christians would say that they believe in, but I'm not so convinced that Christian faith and practices is always a harmful thing.
And he's not alone. Study after study shows Christianity is not the force it once was. In 2021, Pew Research found self-identified Christians making up 63% of the U.S. population, a drop from 75% just 10 years ago. The majority of this decline is happening among Protestants, dropping 10 points in the last decade, while Catholicism remains relatively unchanged. During the same period, the group called religious nuns has steadily grown.
When we ask people about their religious identification, are you Protestant, Catholic, Mormon, Orthodox Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, atheist, agnostic, something else, or nothing in particular? The religious nuns are those people who answer that question by describing themselves as atheist or agnostic or as simply nothing in particular.
In studying the secular shift, researcher Gregory Smith says he sees no sign of this trend slowing down. Religious nuns currently account for about 3 in 10 U.S. adults.
That's, triple, perhaps even getting close to quadruple the share who said that about 3 decades ago.
Other indicators that Americans are growing less religious include prayer. Fewer than half of adults do so daily. 30% say they pray seldomly or not at all. Still, 4 in 10 say they consider religion to be very important in their lives. To better understand the reasons why someone would leave their faith, I talked with Steingard, former lead singer for Hawk Nelson, a Canadian Christian rock band.
Anybody that leaves any religious community, they have to figure out how to sort of hold themselves together and also how to make their way in the world. And that's actually not so easy.
Steingard, whose father and father-in-law are both pastors, announced his decision on Instagram at the height of the pandemic. His announcement sent shockwaves through the Christian community.
People like myself who decide to leave a faith tradition tend to be very focused on the negative aspects of that tradition when we leave, right? We tend to want to point out all the things that we think are harmful or unfair or, unjust.
Steingard believes 3 major reasons people are currently leaving the church include differing beliefs on gay rights, failed support for social justice issues, and political platforms using faith to advance certain polarizing agendas. Brody Carter, CBN News.
And with us now, Bob Smetana with the Religious News Service. He's also the author of a new book, Reorganized Religion. Bob, great to have you with us this evening. So let's start where Brody left off. How big of a factor is the rise of religious nuns as it relates to the decline and the reshaping of the church in America?
It's really important. And one of the things that's happening is the kind of difference between older Americans and younger Americans. So older Americans go to church, younger Americans don't. So some of the decline, people think it's because of what churches have done, when really it is that older people have died off and they haven't passed their faith on to younger people. They've had fewer kids, and those kids don't go to church as much.
This week, new census information in Britain reveals less than half of the people in England and Wales describe themselves as Christians. Bob, in some ways, are we experiencing a delayed reflection of the decades-long decline of religiosity across Europe, where we see people questioning the relevance of God and church?
There's some of that. So we are going to see, and if you look at Pew's projection, Pew projects the next 50 years that depending on a few factors, basically how many people leave, you could have less than half Americans be Christian. And it's important to say that this happens among all kinds of groups. There used to be an idea that conservative churches grew, liberal churches don't. Well, now everyone's declining. The Southern Baptists have lost 2 million members in the last 15 years. The United Methodists are losing folks, the Missouri Synod Lutherans. It goes all across the spectrum, in large part because of declining birth rates, and the loss of the idea that religion is important and that going to church is an important part of life. So it's really a different kind of universe than people used to live in, and that most churches were built to serve.
Yeah. Bob, you draw a very helpful illustration in your book comparing religion in America to a load-bearing wall your wife wants to knock down to expand your kitchen. You write, if organized religion continues to decline and nothing replaces it, then the roof caves in. Would you just explain to us what you mean by that?
Sure. So organized religion plays because it's organized, it helps people live out their beliefs. And we often see this in a number of places. We see this in disasters. We see this in food pantries. We see this at schools. We see this all kinds of charities that are run by religious groups. We also see it in the kind of way that religion helps people's lives, right? If you have a crisis, if someone dies, if you're sick, people rally around them. And it's like I've heard it described as a sort of religious infrastructure. It's like a bridge. You need it there to get across the bridge, and you don't notice it till it's gone. But then when it's gone and you haven't invested in it, everyone is out of luck.
You know, based on your research and interviews, are you at all more hopeful, less hopeful about the future of the American church and its ability to adapt and make the necessary changes to continue providing people a sense of community, a sense of mission, and the other societal benefits? I'm hopeful.
I'm hopeful that because faith and organized religion helps people do a lot of things we need to do. We're a different kind of world. We're reflecting on what kind of nation do we want to be? What kind of people do we want to be? And what does organized religion and faith communities know how to do? It knows how to people to look at their lives and say, what can we do better? To make amends for things they've done wrong, to build a better world, and to build a world in which everyone can thrive. And so I think that, I'm hopeful that people will find that more appealing than the kind of polarization and anger that we see in a lot of parts of the country. So I'm hopeful for that. I also think that sometimes things happen that you don't expect.
Sure.
In particular, I've seen churches that are about to close where new people show up, new immigrants show up, and all of a sudden the church is revitalized.
All right, Bob, we are out of time. Bob Smetana, his book is called Reorganized Religion. Bob, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, a Christian website designer is challenging a Colorado anti-discrimination law. She says her faith prevents her from serving same-sex couples. And on Monday, the Supreme Court will hear her case. As Heather Sells reports, it includes high stakes for religious liberty and free speech.
Lori Smith says her religious beliefs do not allow her to create websites for same-sex weddings. Colorado says that is discrimination. The Supreme Court will now decide.
I've always wanted to create custom artwork for weddings ever since I was a little girl.
Smith left the corporate world to pursue her passion for creating designs for specific causes. Given her biblical beliefs, she hesitated to include weddings after seeing how the state penalized Jack Phillips for refusing to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex couple.
I was cautious about continuing forward because I saw the way that the state of Colorado was treating other people of faith.
In 2018, Phillips defended his religious views at the High Court and won. The justices, however, ruled narrowly, saying hostile statements made by state officials toward him violated his free exercise of religion. Smith's case centers on the larger free speech question and the constitutionality of Colorado's anti-discrimination law. The state maintains wedding vendors must serve all ceremonies. Smith argues that violates her free speech.
It's a really intrusive and a really dangerous thing to tell an artist, you have to create something, you have to speak.
Religious freedom expert Lori Wyndham says this case is very important because protecting religious and political speech is the driving force behind the First Amendment. Colorado's stance, however, is that equal access in the marketplace is what's at stake.
Lori Smith is fully free to choose what websites, services she provides to whom, as long as she does not make the choice to open a business to serve the public. Once she makes that choice, then and only then, she is subject to Colorado's law and has to serve everybody equally.
Smith's legal team disputes that.
Colorado agrees that she serves everyone regardless of sexual orientation, and she simply seeks to choose messages that are consistent with her beliefs.
And her counsel says a win for Smith would be a victory for all beliefs and viewpoints.
This belongs to the LGBT graphic designer who doesn't want to be forced by the government to criticize same-sex marriage.
After 6 years of pursuing this case, Smith has endured severe backlash, including lost business and even death threats. Another reason religious freedom experts say this case matters.
I think a win from the Supreme Court here sends a really strong message that even if somebody's religious beliefs are unpopular, that doesn't mean you get to silence them.
In an era where hostility to people of faith is more common, this case could set clear markers about what is and is not allowed in the marketplace. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thank you, Heather. A bright spot in the middle of an uncertain economy. We'll take a look right after this. Well, welcome back. Against unyielding concerns of a looming recession, America's labor market continues to defy the odds when it comes to job creation. And new government data out today shows November was no different. According to the Labor Department, the economy added 263,000 jobs, and the unemployment rate continues to hover at 3.7%, a 53-year low. President Biden touted today's number as good news ahead of Christmas.
As we go into the holiday season, here's what this all means. The Americans are working, the economy is growing, wages are rising faster than inflation. It means our plan to build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. You're tired of hearing me say that, but it's working.
Still, many economists say job growth isn't great for inflation. Just this week, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell warned robust hiring is keeping prices high. The Federal Reserve is expected to raise interest rates once again in the coming days.
And here with us now is E.J. Antony, research fellow in the Center for Data Analysis at the Heritage Foundation. E.J., welcome. So explain to us why strong hiring could keep inflation high.
Well, the thinking for many of the economists at the Federal Reserve is that if people have more money because they're getting paid more at their jobs, then they will go out and spend more, and therefore that will drive up prices. But they're really putting the cart before the horse, because we have to ask, where did businesses get the money to pay their employees more? And they got that money because the Federal Reserve has been creating it out of nothing. And it is really the Federal Reserve running the printing press, not people getting raises, that is causing inflation.
EJ, we just heard the president talk about the economy and how it's growing. We did see that the third quarter, it did grow significantly more than what people were expecting. He's also saying that the administration's economic plan is working. How do you see it?
You know, I would love to see the evidence for how the administration's plan is working. The first half of the year, the economy actually shrank. And even if you count in the third quarter, which had good growth, the economy is still flat for the year. Meanwhile, prices are up over 7%. So by no means is that a sign of strength. That's a sign of weakness.
You recently wrote a piece titled "Denying Economic Reality Doesn't Help Struggling Americans." How do you see realities being denied?
Well, one example is today's jobs report. It seems like the Biden administration doesn't even understand their own statistics. Yes, the headline jobs number of over 260,000 looks good, but as soon as you get under the hood, you find that the devil is really in the details in today's report. For example, that number comes from a survey of businesses. A survey of households, however, found that employment actually decreased for the month. And once you take all of the double counting out of the establishment survey of businesses, again, where we get that headline jobs number, you find that the number, again, number of people with jobs actually declined in the month of November, not increased.
EJ, in the few seconds we have left, just in time for Christmas, Gas Buddy says average prices could fall below $3 by Christmas. What does that mean for the economy?
Well, it would certainly be some welcomed relief for the American consumer. Unfortunately, it would just be a blip on the radar and is likely not to last as the administration continues its war on fossil fuels, and that includes the oil industry, not just getting the oil out of the ground, but refining it into gasoline as well.
We are going to have to leave it right there. EJ and Tony with the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Debanked and deplatformed. A former senator has his bank account closed without warning. He says it's because he's a Christian conservative. That story next on Faith Nation.
Welcome back. Some conservatives and faith groups claim they're the targets of a practice called debanking, when big banks cancel the accounts of organizations they don't want to do business with.
Former U.S. Senator Ambassador Sam Brownback says that's exactly what happened to him. Dale Hurd brings us the story.
When the National Committee for Religious Freedom, headed by former U.S. Senator and Religious Freedom Ambassador Sam Brownback, needed a bank account, they went to J.P. Morgan Chase. After only a few weeks, they learned their account had been closed.
I went in to make a deposit at a branch here in Kansas about 3 or 4 weeks after we'd opened up the account, I think. And the teller there said, that account's been closed. I go, what? I said, yeah, it's that account's been closed. Your funds will be being sent to you in a couple of weeks. And then later they came back and said, well, if you'll disclose who gives more than 10% of your funds to you and your criteria for supporting candidates as a 501c4, we'll consider reopening up the account.
Brownback says he received an apology letter, but still doesn't know why the bank made the decision.
We want some real answers as to why this happened. You know, and normally what I found is that most people just kind of slink away and just, okay, I got debanked or I got deplatformed, I'll go do something else or I'll find another way. And we thought that's the very reason we exist, the National Committee for Religious Freedom, is so you can have a free exercise, which includes public or private and should include your commercial transactions too.
CBN News contacted J.P. Morgan Chase about the incident, and they assured us that they would never discontinue a relationship because of a religious or political affiliation. And we didn't with this client. We're not proud of how we handled communicating with this client about what we needed from them and have apologized verbally and in writing. And while J.P. Morgan Chase didn't give us a reason for the account closure, they did say we are required by anti-money laundering laws to conduct customer due diligence. Wondering whether it was discrimination, the National Committee for Religious Freedom has started a website called Chased Away, encouraging people of faith to come forward if they've been denied service by a company or a bank.
It also tells me we need to get people of faith in the boardroom. I think we need to start campaigns to get a person of faith on every major corporate board in America.
Used to be companies only wanted your business. These days, they may not, if they think you believe in the wrong things. Since the 2020 election, banks and corporations have denied service to some Trump supporters. And Christian employees continue to be fired for speaking out about their beliefs at work. This year, the Canadian government weaponized its financial system against citizens protesting COVID-19 restrictions. freezing their bank accounts. Banking law expert Nicholas Anthony believes American banks could do the same thing.
Banks have really a ton of power that people don't realize to shut down accounts, to freeze accounts, and upholding them for really any number of reasons. And worse yet, it could really be for any reason, and we don't get to understand why, because there's many cases in which they're prohibited by law from saying what actually happened.
Earlier this year, Republicans warned banks to stop taking liberal positions on social and cultural issues.
I'd heard of this happening to literally dozens of groups. I've had other people tell me that they got debanked, or this insurance company denied them, or this happened to this group.
Journalist Rod Dreher, author of Live Not by Lies, warns that increasing numbers of companies care more about their stands on social issues than the bottom line. And he says Christians will be the victims.
Corporations like Walmart, Apple, and others are richer and more powerful than some countries in this world. They're going to use the power that they have within the corporations and every other institution to persecute the church. People think I'm radical for saying this sort of thing, but I'm telling you, it's coming.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Military members turned soccer super fans. When we come back, how American soldiers stationed in the World Cup's home country are cheering on Team USA. Finally tonight, for the first time, FIFA is holding the World Cup in a Middle Eastern country. Qatar playing host to the historic event.
And American troops at the air base in the capital city of Doha are relishing the moment, offering full-throated and full-hearted support for the home team.
I am through and through very excited to see us compete and put their heart and souls on the field, just like our airmen here are putting their hearts and souls into the mission that they're getting after.
And after this week's earlier win against Iran, Team USA now advances to the round of 16. They'll face off against the Netherlands Saturday morning, with U.S. service members cheering them on throughout the match. Oh, to be there in person.
I know. You know, even here from the sidelines, it's been so fun to watch.
It has been amazing, and we wish them the best.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
We hope you have a great night and a great weekend.